Hello, we're here, part 14. I think this will be the final part of the beginner's tutorial series, and I'm hoping I've explained everything enough, and I hope I've given you enough to get going. But you know now how to move around the viewport. You know how to manipulate an object. You know how to add basic shape like a sphere or a cube. You know about the UVs and how to very simply map them in order to get the textures to display properly. And you know about the outliner and the settings that you've needed so far. So the only thing you don't know about yet is the camera, which we're going to talk about now. But before I do that, just one thing. You'll notice here that the shadow from the sun is, let's just quickly talk about the sun. The sun I have is here. If we go back into normal view, so the sun, it doesn't matter where you put the sun, it's the sun. So if it's here, it's not gonna not light the roof. This is just the angle that the sun will appear. I normally have it about here, so if I normally go into overhead mode with 7 and then just normally give it a bit of an angle, go back into front view with 1, just bring it down a bit. But what happens is, I should actually hang on. Let me rotate that a bit better. There we go. Okay, so you get these harsh shadows, and we can, as though it's a really harsh sun. I mean, you get harsh shadows, but that's too crisp. So here under, you've got your strength here, which is 20, and obviously your color, and your angle at the moment is very small. So I would put that up to about 25, and you can see straight away the shadows are much softer, much nicer, and not so harsh. Okay, so that's the sun. Now what we want to look at is the camera. So if you press this icon over here, the camera, it takes you into the viewport. This is now, if you were to press render, you would render this brick wall. So we see it down here. When you press that, you go into it, and as you can see, that's not going to make a nice picture. There are a few ways to move the camera. You can just go into overhead mode and just move it with the G key, put it somewhere, and then if over on your other window, this is where it's useful to have multiple windows. I'm going to put that as my viewport, and then I'm going to make this one look where the camera goes, and on this one I'm going to move it. So now I can see, I can move it, I can rotate it, but that's way harder than is necessary. So I'm going to go back to this viewport. So if you go into the camera, if you press shift and then apostrophe, or why does it come up like that? I don't know why in my thingy it came up with that, whatever you call it, but it's shift and the key next on the left of enter underneath @ on my keyboard. It's an apostrophe. So shift and apostrophe, and now you can freely move. And if I'm sure you're used to first-person shooters by now, WSAD, move that. So S makes me back, A I'm strafing. If you shift, you do it quicker. So Q goes down, E goes up. So this is all, if you, as I say, anyone who uses or plays any kind of FPS will understand WSAD. So yeah, you can just set up, and I'm going to set it up. I mean, it's you know, just for the render, that's fine, like this. And what happens if you zoom out too far? So I'll just press shift and apostrophe again. If you keep zooming, eventually the house like that is clipping. It's starting to clip. And that is purely down to the clipping distance of the camera. So let's just put it there. So this camera can only see that far. So the rest of it is not visible. If this menu isn't here, press N and you get this menu. Oh, we're in the wrong one actually. Sorry. Go over to here. This menu here. When you've got the camera selected, you'll have this camera icon here. And here where you've got clip start and end, the end is 100 meters. So this is now further than 100 meters, at least the rest of the house. So if we just bump that up to 500 meters, we could now go even further back before it starts clipping. All right. And as you're doing your WSAD if you're walking or if you're running with shift. If you roll the mouse wheel up, it will go quicker. So I'm going quicker by rolling the mouse wheel up, and then if I roll the mouse wheel down, it will get slower. So you can really set up your camera, really fine tune it, and I'm just going to put mine there. Very quickly, actually, I'm just going to put a chimney in. Shift right click on the roof, Shift A, add a cube, scale it down, scale it up on the Z, move it up on the Z. Probably I'm going to make it wider but not taller, so S, Shift Z. There we go. I'm going to Control A, remember to apply the scale. So I'm Control A, scale, and then I'm just going to add the bricks. Obviously that's all messy, so tab into edit mode, select all of them, all the faces with A, press U for unwrapping, and cube projection. And again, we can see that it's way too small, but we don't want to edit the material, so we'll just change this window to UV editor. We've already got them selected, and I think we just need to scale them down to make the texture larger to match the house, which is, I guess, that. Okay, that's that chimney. It's great. Right, so we've got our camera set up now. Now, after 6 minutes, we'll talk about the render. So, if we go back to our render settings, we've got the render samples are 1024, the render samples are 4096. So I know this will look this crisp really at 1024 samples, but you can normally get away, well, depending on the project, but I'm going to go, in fact, just to show you. So if we do 2 samples, it's only going to render through 2 samples. I can't press F12 because it messes with my camera software. But if you go up to here in render, you've got render image and render animation. So if you want to render image, you'll get a screen pop up, bosh. And yeah, I don't know why it took that long for 2 samples. So this is 2 samples. So there's very little detail. The noise has been denoised, which is why it's all nasty in these bits. So it's not a great one. If we then, let's say we render at 200 samples, and then I can't press F12. F12 is the shortcut. I can't press it because it will stop my camera. So if we render image, so now it's going to go through, as you see here, sample. It's running through all the samples. It's done it fairly quickly. And now it's done. And you can see it's definitely crisper. There is still a little bit of noise. So then if we took this up to 600 samples and then press F12 or do it my way, render image, you can see the samples going up, 200, 300, 400, 500. This is telling you how much maximum memory you're using. So this apparently took 498 megabytes to render. So this is the smoothest, the cleanest one. So what's evident is the more samples you give it in the render window, in the render samples, the sharper and crisper your image will be. If I take off denoise and put it back to 2 samples, so it's not going to try and denoise. I pressed F12 and stopped the camera. So it's not going to denoise this one. I'm going to render that image. And look how nasty that is. Look how nasty that is. So that's 2 samples. So now let's go again. Let's just bump it straight up to 600 samples. So again, just that oh, I've put myself up. I've got all my keys. Where's the render window? View render. So just keep that in mind. That's how it looks at 2 samples. It's hideous. There is hardly any detail. It's completely messed up. So I don't know why I've got 2 points. I've got 2 point lights, one here and one here. I don't know why. And I've got 2 points, so I'm going to delete point 1. There you go. In fact, I don't need point 2. You can get rid of those lights. That's better. So now let's set that to 600 and let's render that again. And you can see there very quickly. So that's without denoising. It's fine, absolutely fine, without any denoising whatsoever. You can see it. You can see a bit of the noise here that shouldn't be there, but the more samples, the less of that you would see. So yeah, you've got to find the balance with how many samples you need, because the more samples, obviously, the longer the render time. One good point to note about the camera is you're rendering in your viewport all of this around as well as what's in the middle. If you press Control and B, you'll get a little target here, and then just make a box around the camera and it will cut out everything around it. So it's not rendering anything outside this window unless you move. I mean, if you did it with the camera, it's going to stay at the camera. If you do it like this, you can still pick a window, so that will help your system if it's struggling. Control Alt B will reset it. One tip which I had no idea about until recently, and I searched for the answer. So if you're in Eevee, you don't have the Control B, doesn't work. It's still rendering everything outside. What you need to do is make sure the camera's selected, and under viewport display, this, I forget, Passepartout. At the moment it's on 0.5. If you put it all the way up, it completely, and that is, I don't know why that was so hard to find. It's an integral part of framing your shot. If you can still see even a bit of things around it, you've got no idea of the shot. So you want it, you don't want to see outside the camera, as in if it was real. So I think that's it for rendering. I think that's it for the camera. You can have multiple cameras and you can mark them to change during an animation, but we're nowhere near that. And we have obviously got other things that change when you select Eevee. But I think that's all you need to know to get started, make something and render it. You could, one final thing, under your render settings, if you just want to render the model, you don't want any of this light in the background. Under film, you've got transparent, so tick that. Now when you render, don't press F12, I'll stop the camera. Now when you render, this will be a transparent PNG. You can image, save as, and then give it either a PNG or a TIFF, but as long as you've got alpha, it will need alpha, because some PNGs won't have out. You can just black and white or RGB, but you're going to want RGBA for alpha. RGBA, yeah, RGBA. Just quick think. Render, camera, move, check. Lights. There we go. Very quick. To add a light, let's just put one here. Shift A, and then the lights are all here. You've got a point, a sun, a spot, and an area. The points I use mostly. The sun is always there. Occasionally the spot, rarely the area. And they apply just the same as anything else. Once you add one to the scene, you can press G and move it. Clicking on the lighting, put in, I don't know, 20,000 watts. Makes it a very bright light. So, and then you just move it, set it up. And again, if the shadows are too harsh, just edit the radius, 20. Well, it's way big, 1. And that will just soften up the shadows. But that, I think, is the lot. Wicked. I think that's it. Okay, that's the beginner's tutorial, 14 parts, and I think that is enough for you to get cracking on your own and to start making things yourself. So the next one, if I do another series, if people find this interesting, I'll do another one and I'll just get a bit more advanced. But what I've given you there is pretty much where was my base understanding when I started. I needed to know those things to get cracking, and the rest of it was about exploring and experimentation, trying out different modifiers, googling different modifiers. But yeah, as I say, if this helps people, then I'll do another one, and I'll just get a bit more advanced, maybe. All right, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned from it. I hope that sets you up on a great journey with Blender, because it's an awesome piece of software. All right, I've been Nick. You have been you. I might see you in the next one. Bye.